everyone, my name is Abby Weaver, and this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on OCALI's website for educational purposes. Considerations for deaf and hard of hearing learners in the general education classroom. This is the elementary edition. I'm going to try to be mindful of using both disability person first language, and then also I'm coming from the cultural perspective, as I talked about in the last webinar, where as a deaf woman, I am going to sometimes say deaf and hard of hearing learners from the cultural viewpoint. So objectives, participants will name one resource document used to facilitate education of deaf and hard of hearing students and a reason to support the use of the document. Number 2, participants will be able to identify 2 different types of service providers and their roles related to deaf and hard of hearing students in the elementary setting. Number 3, participants will be able to identify 3 environmental considerations for deaf and hard of hearing students in the elementary academic environment. And number 4, participants will be able to identify 3 ways to provide access to information within the educational environment. The communication plan, I mentioned this in the last webinar, but as we get older and our world gets bigger, how we communicate will change. And the elementary years are critical. We want to make sure that the language gap is not getting wider. So as we have to communicate with various teachers, bus drivers, custodians, secretaries, or school administrators, we want to make sure that the child is able to communicate with everyone adult-wise, but also their peers. So think about both groups. Now, this is the expanded core curriculum, and this is what I would consider deaf and hard of hearing standards, where you learn how to navigate your deafness or hard of hearing life. Before I focused on audiology in the last webinar, but we think about self-determination and advocacy. Being able to walk up to the teacher and give them your microphone now that you're old enough. Here, I need you to wear this, or explaining to the sub, hey, I need you to wear this so I can hear you, is a very important life skill that starts young. Establishing roles in the school environment. Who are the service providers on the team and who may need to be added? Who's not at the table that we should bring to the table? How and when will each service provider support the team and the child? As a general education teacher, you may have had 1 class or 2 on disabilities. And I know for me, when I took the disability class in college, it was 1 night on deafness. And even then, that was a long time ago. The technology has changed vastly. And even in my short teaching career, how much the technology has changed is eye-opening. So you really do want to make sure you have different people with different skills at the table, because no one can know everything. And this is really critical. What's the difference between an educational interpreter and an instructional aide? I have well-meaning educators that will sometimes make a comment, well, I really wish the classroom interpreter would float around and help the other students with their work when they're not interpreting. That's a red flag to me, because they should be on alert, actively processing everything that's said in the classroom environment and ready to pick up their hand when the child looks up from their coloring paper, and then they're going. But if my interpreter is floating and helping Timmy, and now I need to do something, that communication pathway or bridge is gone. What is the difference between an intervention specialist and a teacher for the deaf and hard of hearing? Why would you want both individuals at the table? And both of them are highly valued and critical to have at the table. Environmental consideration, visual and auditory noise, clutter. Some classrooms have so much on the wall. It's like, what's important? What's for today's lesson? What tool am I going to use? But also there's visual noise. So if everyone's popping up and floating around the room, when I have a hearing loss, I'm going to be constantly scanning the environment because I don't know, oh, am I supposed to get up? It's a time for me to go. And then the auditory noise, trying to keep down all of the chairs moving and the scraping and the markers and the door. And some people play background music in their classrooms. I appreciate it, but as an individual with a hearing that's compromised, because I am deaf, that background noise or music kind of masks what I'm listening to, even with some of the best assisted listening devices. Distance, how far away are you? Split focus. So if I'm constantly looking at my worksheet, looking at my teacher, looking at the smart board or electronic whiteboard, or the interpreter or my friend, that's split focus, and that is exhausting. So the more we can reduce that split focus, it's really going to help have the whole picture, and then physical placement of individuals and materials and items in the classroom. Consistency is important. Students, especially young students, may not have the ability to express their needs for various supports yet. You don't know what you need. You don't know what you like or don't like yet. Monitor their behavior and academic progress to ensure more or different supports aren't needed. Assistive listening device consideration. What assistive listening devices are being used? Hearing aids, cochlear implant, Baha, bone anchor hearing aid, microphones. Who's doing the daily sound check and monitoring to ensure it's working properly? Too often, students may have a dead battery or earwax clog in the ear mold. There's so many things that can go wrong. It's technology. It should be checked at the start of each day. You don't want to be doing a fabulous lesson and find out later on that they didn't hear a word you said or it was diminished. Because sometimes you're like, well, they heard me. Yeah, but maybe not as well as they could have had everything been working properly. What are their limitations? Every technology has pros and cons. Distance, multiple speakers. How do they connect to that boombox or a CD player or however you're playing, we're going on a bear hug? What's the appropriate placement for the microphone? If it's in the wrong spot, it's down by your belly, it's not going to pick you up like it should when it's wide distance down below for most microphones. And then what do I need to change in my teaching style as the microphone can only hear one speaker, such as if a student asks me a question and I only say the answer, you're only ever hearing half of the equation, the question or the answer. You never get both. Interpreter and transliterator considerations. How am I preparing my interpreter to interpret the content? You may be the best fabulous teacher in the world and you have a fabulous interpreter, but if you haven't collaborated, you're not going to have that beauty of that interpreted message because it's going to be compromised. How am I ensuring a clear line of sight to the interpreter? It should not feel like a tennis match where I'm watching my teacher, I'm watching my interpreter, I'm watching my, it's exhausting. Where is placement so that way my student has access to both of us? Both languages, both individuals is critical. And how do I need to change my classroom space, physical or virtual, in order not to cause barriers or access issues? But also, how am I modeling the appropriate use of an interpreter, not only as a teacher, but for my hearing students as they grow up, or my deaf student as they grow up in the educational community? Captioning considerations. Real quick, check the quality and clarity of the captions. Start young. Captions improve literacy skills. It's a great, easy tool to benefit everyone in the classroom. Captioning considerations. C-print. This can be used at a young age. It's more tricky at this age, but you do need to think about exposing students to it. So if I have a human captionist versus auto speech recognition generated caption, it's a great way to start having that dialogue. What does it look like when I have the morning announcements from the PA system captioned? Or if I'm doing a virtual hybrid class in Google Meet, Zoom, wherever, what's the captioning look like there? Or if I'm doing media, what does it look like when I have that accessible and captioned? And then I may need to think about how many words per minute can my student read? So they may not be ready for C-print, but they may be ready for some types of captioning because they're going to pick out the words that make sense to them. And also captioning in social situations and also for the phone, for those of us that use captioning phones. Virtual learning space considerations. You need to think about what vendor you're using. A lot of schools have dictated that to us, but also the ease of access. And this again goes back to captioning. I prefer certain vendors over others just for the ease of access. I can walk in, click caption, and I have it, whereas another vendor, I have to ask the host to turn it on, and then I can turn it on. Amplification devices and assistive listening technology should be used to ensure auditory access. Some kids will not do well with headphones. I cannot wear headphones because my hearing aids will squeal and it's uncomfortable. So I patch in when I listen to technology, and a lot of our students will be doing that as well. And what does the student see when the screen is shared? Do they lose you? So they can no longer get the facial cues, lip reading cues? Are they having access to their interpreter? How big are you on the screen? Are you 2 inches? Field trips and special school events. Bring any assistive listening devices provided by the school. Most IEPs will say all academic environments. Well, if it's an academic field trip going to the museum, you should have access to your teacher's voice during that museum. How will the equipment be used or not used? So field day with the water balloon, you're not going to be using the assistive technology then. It should be locked up and safe away from those water balloons. And then will the venue have assistive listening devices that need to be checked out? And they have additional accommodations. So if I go to the theater for a live performance, I'm going to use the theater, their interpreter for the play, and the school interpreter for, mealtime, on the bus, going to and from the venue. But the venue is going to have their their theatrical interpreter on stage with the educational interpreter by my student. And that educational interpreter might sign, the little chit chat before the lights go down. But then when the lights go down, the theatrical interpreter. And this is free under the American with Disabilities Act, but a lot of schools aren't sure how do you make those connections. And that's where the marriage of the school's general ed teacher, the intervention specialist, and the teacher for the deaf can kind of make things happen sometimes. And we have various resources that you can reference. Please go and look at the handout. And if you have any questions, we'll be around for you to ask those questions. And then thank you, and visit us at www.ocali.org.